The night was cold, and the rain did not stop. For 10 long years, the alien girl had no warm bed. She slept on stone floors, on broken tiles, and sometimes on bare ground. The cold bit into her skin, and the damp air made her bones ache. Every night was a test of survival, and every morning was another reminder that she was unwanted. Her name was Salira, though no one cared to know it. She was small for her kind, with thin arms and legs, her ribs showing through her torn clothes. Once, she belonged to a family, but war took everything away. Her people scattered, her home destroyed, and the girl was left with nothing. She wandered from city to city, from planet to planet, searching for a place to rest, but all doors closed against her. The humans she had seen before were not always kind. Some chased her away, some threw stones. Others laughed as she stumbled through muddy streets. She was called a beggar, a stray, a useless child. But she carried herself with quiet strength, even when hunger pressed hard against her stomach. She told herself each night, "I will survive," and somehow she did. Now the storm raged above an outpost on the edge of the galaxy. The outpost was half military camp, half trading post. Its tents stood in rows, lit by weak lanterns, their fabric shaking in the wind. Water pooled on the ground, and boots splashed through it as soldiers moved between stations. They cursed the weather, shouted orders, and pulled their coats tighter against the rain. Salira stood at the edge of the camp, her hair plastered to her face. It had once been silver white, like strands of moonlight, but now it was tangled and dull. Her skin, faintly glowing blue, was streaked with dirt and rain. She hugged herself, shivering, staring at the tents where warmth glowed inside. The smell of food drifted through the air, making her mouth water. Her body begged for rest. Her soul begged for mercy. She had not known the comfort of a bed for 10 years. Each night, she lay her head on stone, on wood, or on the ground. Her body had grown used to pain, but her heart had not. There were moments she dreamed of softness, of warmth, of safety. But every morning those dreams were washed away with the rain. The soldiers laughed inside the largest tent. Their voices carried through the canvas, mixing with the storm. They drank, they ate, they joked about battles and victories. Salira listened, her body trembling, her feet bare in the mud. She could have walked away, but her strength was gone. If she walked into the night again, she might not survive until morning. Her chest rose and fell quickly, each breath shallow. She felt the cold biting deeper, sharper, crueler. Her thin shift clung to her skin, torn in places, exposing bruises. Her eyes, large and luminous, searched for one face among the crowd. And then she saw him. A human stood near the entrance of the tent. He was taller than the others, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy coat. His face was weathered, his eyes dark, and his posture still. While others laughed and jeered, he only watched the rain. Salira's heart pounded in her chest. She did not know why her eyes stayed on him, but something about his silence called to her. Her lips trembled, her throat dry. She stepped closer to the tent, the mud pulling at her feet. Her body screamed with fear, but her heart whispered, "Ask." 10 years of silence pressed against her voice. But finally, the words escaped, weak but clear. "Please, human, just one night in your warm bed." The sound of her whisper seemed louder than the storm. The laughter inside the tent stopped. Forks and cups froze in midair, soldiers turned their heads. Eyes widened, and smirks spread across their faces. No alien had ever dared to ask such a thing, and no one expected her to beg so openly. Salira's eyes did not leave the silent man. Her body shook, her pride broke, but her voice carried a desperate truth. The storm raged on outside, lightning cracked across the sky. And in that single moment, her fate hung between cruelty and mercy. The camp waited, holding its breath. Would the human laugh, turn her away, or invite her in? The whisper hung in the air, fragile yet piercing. "Please, human, just one night in your warm bed." The words seemed to cut through the laughter, through the storm, through every beating heart in the tent. For a moment, time itself froze. The fire crackled, the rain hammered the canvas roof, and still no one moved. The soldiers inside exchanged glances, their mouths twisted into cruel smiles. One man leaned forward, his cup spilling a drop of drink onto the table. "Did I hear right?" he muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. Another burst out laughing, slamming his hand on the table. The alien begs for a human bed. The sound rolled across the tent like thunder, joined by more chuckles and jeers. Salira stood trembling at the entrance, her head bowed, her soaked hair covering half her face. The mud clung to her ankles, her bare feet red from cold, her fingers clutching the thin fabric of her torn dress. She did not look at the laughing men. She kept her eyes fixed on the silent one, the man who had not spoken yet. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breath shallow but steady. She had risked everything to speak those words, and now she waited for his answer. The human at the door, his name was Kale, remained motionless. He stared at her with eyes dark as the storm behind her, his jaw tight, his body like stone. The soldiers shouted louder, mocking both her and him. "Go on, Kale, let her in. Share your bed with a stray dog. Or maybe give her your boots. She looks ready to die." Their laughter burned hot, but Kale did not laugh. He did not move. He only studied the girl. Salira's whisper replayed in his mind. Not a demand, not a trick, only a plea. There was no pride in her voice, only exhaustion and a desperate hunger for warmth. Kale felt the weight of it pressing against his chest, and he knew the eyes of the entire tent were waiting for his choice. The rain grew harsher, dripping through cracks in the canvas. Each drop hit the ground like a drumbeat, echoing the tension inside. Salira swayed on her feet, her knees weak, her lips trembling with cold. She whispered again, softer this time, almost breaking. "Just one night, please." A soldier threw his cup aside and stood, swaggering toward the girl, his grin wide, his voice cruel. "You think humans owe you kindness? You think Kale is your savior?" He reached out as if to shove her back into the storm. But before his hand could touch her, Kale moved. Fast as lightning, his hand shot up and caught the soldier's wrist. The grip was iron, the message clear. Silence crashed through the tent once again. Kale's voice came at last, deep, calm, steady. "She asked me, not you." The soldier yanked his hand back, muttering under his breath, retreating into the shadows. Kale turned his eyes back to the girl. Her glowing blue skin shimmered faintly under the lantern light, her silver hair dripping, her body trembling. And for the first time in years, Salira felt someone looking at her not with disgust, not with mockery, but with thought. Kale sighed, his shoulders heavy with the burden of choice. He knew the others would not forgive him if he showed mercy. In this camp, kindness was weakness, compassion was a stain. But he also knew that turning her away meant sending her to death in the storm. And Kale was a man who had already seen too much death. His silence stretched, and Salira's heart pounded with every second. Finally, he spoke, his voice like gravel under rain. "One night." The words were simple, but they shook the tent like a hammer. The soldiers erupted with protests, some shouting, some laughing harder. Kale has gone soft, sharing his bed with an alien girl. What shame. But Kale ignored them, his hand lifted in quiet command. "Enough," he said, and his tone ended every voice in the room. He stepped aside, opening the way for Salira. The storm raged behind her, the fire glowed before her. Her eyes widened, tears forming as her shaking legs carried her across the threshold. Each step felt heavier. Each step felt like breaking the chains of 10 long years. Inside the tent, warmth wrapped around her. The smell of food filled her nose. The glow of fire touched her skin. Her breath caught. Her knees buckled, and for a moment she thought she would collapse. But Kale's hand steadied her, firm, quiet, unshaken. He did not smile. He did not speak, but his gesture spoke louder than words. For the first time in 10 years, Salira had found not just shelter, but a human who listened. The soldiers watched with mixed faces, anger, mockery, disbelief, but no one dared to stop Kale. Salira's whisper had been answered, and her long night of wandering had changed forever. The firelight flickered across Kale's face, shadows stretching along the tent walls. Salira stood trembling beside him, every eye in the camp locked on her, every whisper cutting through her like a blade. Yet in that moment, it was only his answer that mattered. Would he send her back into the storm, or let her inside to the warmth she had begged for? Kale's silence dragged heavy in the air. The soldiers muttered, their voices dripping with mockery. "Soft," one sneered. "He'll break for a pretty face." Another spat, "Kindness to aliens? He'll regret it." But Kale's jaw tightened, and his eyes never left Salira. He saw the truth in her face. Not a trick, not a game, but a soul crushed by years of cold. Her eyes held a fragile light, one that fought against the darkness pressing in from every side. A decade of pain written in the way she shivered, in the way her thin body swayed with weakness. And still, she stood, whispering her plea again, "Please, just one night." Kale raised his hand slowly, commanding silence. The laughter died, the whispers froze, even the fire seemed to quiet. He spoke with calm certainty, his voice cutting through the storm outside. "One night," he said, "she stays." The words rolled like thunder, final and unshakable. Gasps and protests filled the tent. "Kale, you've lost your mind. Why risk it for her?" But his eyes silenced them, sharp as steel. Kale was no man to argue with, and they knew it. Salira's knees nearly gave way as relief washed over her. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back. Slowly, carefully, she stepped past the threshold into the tent. The warmth of fire wrapped around her, her body trembling harder as heat touched her frozen skin. For the first time in 10 years, she was not standing in the storm. Kale pulled a chair closer to the fire and gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself carefully, almost afraid the seat would vanish beneath her. The crackle of flames filled her ears. The smell of roasted food made her stomach twist with hunger. Her fingers reached toward the heat, trembling, almost unbelieving it was real. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but her spirit held back, waiting for the moment this kindness might be snatched away. Kale removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The weight of it was heavy, the warmth immediate. Salira closed her eyes for a breath, whispering a thank you, though her voice was so soft only he heard. The soldiers muttered again, but none dared to speak too loud. There was something in Kale's gaze that warned them. Yet outside the tent, shadows moved. Unseen eyes watched from the darkness beyond the campfire glow. Figures cloaked in rain, waiting, studying. Salira's presence had not gone unnoticed. And though she had begged for just one night of safety, danger was already drawing closer. The storm outside screamed like a living beast, rain hammering the canvas roof, thunder shaking the ground. Inside the tent, the fire burned low, its glow wrapping the space in trembling orange light. Salira sat near it, Kale's heavy coat still on her shoulders, her small hands stretched toward the flames. Her eyes reflected the fire, wide and filled with disbelief. For 10 years, warmth had been only a dream, and now it was real, burning against her skin. The soldiers gave her sharp looks, some filled with disgust, others with mocking smiles. But none dared speak openly. Kale's presence was enough to silence them. He sat across from her, his dark eyes watching quietly. He did not ask questions, he did not demand answers. He only studied the way she clutched the coat as if it were life itself. A bowl of food was placed before her, simple rations, stew, and bread. Salira hesitated, her fingers hovering over it. Her stomach ached with hunger, but years of scorn had taught her to be careful. She glanced up at Kale, waiting for him to nod before she took a bite. The taste was plain, but to her it felt like a feast. Each mouthful melted on her tongue, bringing tears she tried to hide. Kale leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, silent as always. He noticed her small movements, the way she chewed slowly, as though afraid the food might vanish. The firelight touched her silver hair, dripping water onto the ground. She looked fragile, but there was something fierce buried under her exhaustion. A will to survive, a spark that 10 years of cold had not destroyed. When the bowl was empty, Kale pointed toward the bed. The soldiers muttered again, their whispers thick with scorn. Soft, one hissed, "She doesn't deserve it." But Kale's gaze cut through them, sharp as a blade. No one moved, no one stopped him. Salira rose slowly, her legs trembling. She touched the edge of the bed with her fingers, her breath catching. It was simple, a cot with a wool blanket, but to her it was more precious than gold. Her throat tightened, tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, barely audible, 10 years, and now. Her voice broke, and she lowered herself onto the bed. The softness under her body shocked her. The blanket's weight pressed against her skin, the warmth seeping deep into her bones. Her hands clutched the fabric, pulling it close, her tears finally falling. She buried her face against it, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. For the first time in a decade, she was not lying on stone, not shivering against the cold ground. For the first time, she felt human. Cale turned his face away, giving her privacy. But his eyes stayed sharp, watching the entrance. The storm outside grew harsher, the wind howling like a warning. And in the distance, faint lights moved between the trees. He knew the outpost was not safe tonight. Salira's breathing slowed, her sobs fading into soft rhythms. Her body surrendered to exhaustion, her eyelids heavy. She whispered one last time before sleep claimed her. "Thank you, human." Her voice cracked, but it carried a truth no one in the camp could deny. Cale stayed awake, his hand resting on the rifle near his chair. He did not close his eyes. He did not allow himself rest. The girl had asked for one night of safety, and he would make sure she had it. Outside, the shadows crept closer, unseen enemies waiting for the right moment. The warmth of the bed had given Salira hope, but the price of mercy had only begun. Morning never truly came to the outpost. The storm clouds still hung low, the ground was soaked, and the air carried the heavy smell of mud and oil. Inside the camp, whispers had spread like wildfire. Cale had taken in the alien girl, given her food, given her warmth, and let her rest in his bed for the night. To some soldiers, it was proof of weakness. To others, it was betrayal. Around the fire pit, men muttered while sharpening their blades. "She's dangerous," one spat. "You don't know what her kind carries." Another leaned closer, his voice low and poisonous. "Cale thinks he's noble, but kindness to aliens always comes with a cost." The words carried weight, turning into rumors, then into resentment. But Cale walked among them with his usual calm, his silence cutting deeper than their insults. None dared to challenge him directly, not yet. Salira woke slowly, her body stiff from years of sleeping on stone. For a moment she forgot where she was, the warmth around her confusing her senses. Her fingers tightened on the blanket. Her eyes fluttered open to see canvas walls instead of cracked streets. The sound of rain was still there, but the cold did not touch her skin. For the first time in 10 years, she felt safe, even if only for a fragile heartbeat. She turned her head and saw Cale sitting in the corner, awake, unmoving, his rifle across his knees. He had not slept, he had not looked away. His eyes met hers, and though he said nothing, she felt the weight of his protection. She whispered, her voice weak but clear, "Thank you." Cale gave only a small nod, but it was enough. Outside, the camp grew restless. The commander of the outpost arrived, his cloak heavy with rain, his eyes sharp as a blade. He did not smile, he did not joke, he simply asked, "Is it true, Cale? You let an alien sleep in your tent?" The question carried more than curiosity, it carried judgment. Every soldier stopped what he was doing, waiting for Cale's answer. Cale stood slowly, his shoulders broad, his face calm. "It's true," he said, his voice steady as stone. Gasps spread across the camp. A few men shook their heads, some cursed under their breath. The commander's eyes narrowed. "Do you know what that means? If she brings danger, it falls on us all." Cale's reply was simple, his tone final. "If danger comes, it falls on me." Salira watched from the tent flap, her heart heavy. She had begged for one night of warmth, but now she saw the weight of that mercy resting on Cale's shoulders. The other humans looked at her with contempt, some with open hatred. She lowered her gaze, shame burning in her chest. But even as she thought of leaving to spare him, her legs would not move. She had nowhere else to go, nowhere else to survive. And then, the first sign appeared. From the watchtower, a guard shouted, his voice cutting through the storm. Movement beyond the ridge. Shapes in the rain. The camp stirred, weapons raised, orders barked. Cale's eyes sharpened, and he knew. Her enemies had found her. The soldiers looked from the ridge to the girl, their faces twisted with blame, with suspicion, with fear. One shouted, "She led them here." Another grabbed for his knife. "We should throw her back to them." But Cale's voice roared above the chaos. "Stand down." His presence froze them. His command held the camp in check. Salira's breath caught, her body trembling. She had asked for one night, and in return, she had brought danger to the only man who had shown her kindness. The storm outside grew louder, the lights on the ridge moving closer. Cale tightened his grip on his rifle, his voice low but certain. "This night is not over," he said, "and mercy always has a price." The alarm spread across the outpost like fire. Men rushed to grab their rifles, boots splashing in the mud, voices rising against the thunder. The ridge beyond the camp flickered with strange lights, shadows moving in the storm. Figures marched out of the rain, armored, silent, their weapons glowing faintly through the sheets of water. Salira froze at the tent flap, her body trembling, her heart hammering. She knew those shapes, those steps, that armor. They had hunted her for years, and now they had found her again. Cale stood tall at the center of the camp, his rifle already in his hands. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with sharp fire. The soldiers around him shifted nervously, muttering curses, some glancing at Salira with blame. "This is her fault," one hissed. "She brought them here." But Cale's voice cut through the fear like a blade. "Enough, we fight." The storm raged louder, lightning split the sky, and then the first shot came. A blast of red energy tore through the darkness, striking the camp wall and sending sparks into the rain. Men shouted, firing back, the crack of rifles echoing in the storm. Mud churned under their feet, smoke and rain mixing into a blur. The attackers pressed closer, their armor shining cold and merciless. Salira's knees weakened, her hands clutching the edge of the canvas. She had asked for one night, one chance to rest. But now men bled and fought because of her. Her breath came ragged, her chest tight, her mind screaming to hide. Yet when she saw Cale standing firm, rain soaking his coat, rifle steady, something inside her broke open. A spark, a fire she had buried for years. Her people were not weak, not helpless. Once, she had trained to fight, before war and loss had turned her into a wanderer. Her blood burned, her muscles remembered. She could not let Cale fight for her alone. Salira ran into the storm, her bare feet splashing in the mud, her silver hair whipping in the wind. Cale turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing, but he did not stop her. She grabbed a fallen blade from the ground, its edge heavy in her hands. For a heartbeat, fear threatened to drown her. But then another blast of energy seared past her face, and her fear turned into fury. She screamed, a sound that carried above the storm. Her small body moved with sudden speed, the blade flashing, cutting into one of the armored figures. The soldier fell, shocked by the strength that had returned to her. The humans around her stared in disbelief. This fragile alien girl, the one who had begged for warmth, now fought beside them with fire in her eyes. Cale's lips tightened into the faintest trace of a smile. He turned back to the fight, his rifle cracking, each shot precise. Together, they carved a line in the storm, human and alien, side by side. The camp roared with new strength, soldiers no longer mocking, no longer doubting. They fought harder, because mercy had turned into power. The attackers pressed again, their voices harsh, their weapons bright. But Salira's body moved with old rhythm, strikes fast, eyes burning. Her fear had turned into rage, her weakness into strength. Cale covered her flank, she covered his. Each breath, each step, each strike bound them tighter. When the last of the attackers fell, silence returned, broken only by thunder and the ragged breaths of survivors. Bodies lay in the mud, the rain washing blood into dark rivers. Salira stood panting, her blade trembling in her hands, her chest heaving. The soldiers stared at her, no longer with hatred, but with awe. The alien girl who had begged for a bed had now saved them from destruction. Cale lowered his rifle, his voice calm as always. "She stays," he said simply. No one dared to argue, not anymore. The storm still raged, but inside the camp a different fire burned, one of respect, one of quiet fear, one of change. Salira's eyes turned to Cale, tears mixing with the rain. She whispered, barely holding her breath, "I thought I was weak." Cale shook his head once, his voice steady. "You were never weak." And in that moment, under the storm, a new bond was forged in blood and fire. The storm slowly faded, leaving only the smell of smoke and the sound of dripping rain. The outpost was quiet now, broken tents sagging, mud dark with blood, and soldiers slumped in exhaustion. Bodies of enemies lay scattered across the ridge, their weapons glowing faintly in the wet soil. But the camp still stood, and the humans had survived. Salira dropped the blade she carried, her hands trembling, her chest heaving. Her small body shook from the weight of battle, her knees weak, her face pale. The rain had washed away the dirt, leaving her silver hair shining under the storm's weak light. She looked around, expecting anger, expecting blame. But instead, she saw eyes wide with something new: respect. The same soldiers who had mocked her, who had called her useless, now stayed silent. They had seen her fight. They had seen her stand beside Kale, and they could no longer call her weak. Still, their silence was heavy, uncertain, and filled with questions. But none of them spoke, because Kale's voice came first, steady and final. "She stays," he said again, his words rolling through the camp like thunder. No one argued, no one dared. Salira lowered her head, tears mixing with rain. She had asked for only one night, one bed, one chance to rest. But Kale had given her more. He had given her dignity, a place to stand, a chance to fight. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I thought you would turn me away." Kale's gaze held hers, calm and unshaken. "You asked for one night," he said, "but you earned more than that." The fire inside the tent flickered weakly, its glow warm against the shadows. Kale gestured for her to return inside. The bed still waited, the blanket still warm, the small space now holding more meaning than any palace. Salira hesitated, her voice soft. "One night was all I asked. Why give me more?" Kale looked at her with quiet eyes, his answer simple: "Because mercy is never wasted." She stepped back into the tent, her bare feet leaving small prints in the mud. The soldiers watched her go, some confused, some thoughtful, but none stopping her. She sat once more on the bed, clutching the blanket to her chest. And this time, when she closed her eyes, it was not just warmth she felt, but belonging. The storm outside still rumbled, but inside there was peace. Salira's journey of 10 years had led her to this place, to this night, to this man. She had begged for one night, but what she found was a future. And Kale, the human who had chosen kindness over scorn, became the proof of what humanity truly was. Not cruelty, not mockery, but compassion that could change lives. And perhaps, one day, change the galaxy itself.